My name is Elena. I'm 47, though I suppose age matters less to me now than it did when I was 27 or even 37. Life has a way of softening those sharp edges of concern about time and its passing. I live a quiet life in a small, sunlit apartment overlooking a park. My days are filled with routines: morning tea with honey, a brisk walk to the market, hours at my little antique shop, and evenings spent reading or attending to my modest collection of plants. Predictable, comfortable, and I thought fulfilling enough. That was until last Wednesday, when my carefully orchestrated world shifted ever so slightly. I had stopped at the café on Birch Avenue, a charming spot I frequented when I wanted to indulge in a buttery croissant and a rich latte. The air was warm that day, tinged with the earthy scent of rain that had just stopped. I found my usual corner seat, tucked by the window, and allowed myself the luxury of watching life pass by. That's when I saw him. He couldn't have been more than 25 or 26. Tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck and a stride that carried an effortless confidence. His presence was magnetic. There was something about the way he smiled at the barista, a smile that was warm and genuine, as if he truly saw her. I don't know why I couldn't look away. It wasn't just his charm. It was the way he seemed so fully alive, as if the world was his to explore, and he was unafraid to take it on. And me? I felt awake. That's the only way I can describe it. As if some dormant part of me had stirred, the edges of my ordinary day now tinged with something extraordinary. I told myself it was nothing. Just a passing stranger in a cafe. A fleeting moment, like so many others. But as I walked home that afternoon, his image stayed with me. The way he leaned against the counter, the curve of his smile, the glimmer in his eyes. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself hoping I'd see him again. I didn't expect to see him again. Life has a way of moving on, of pulling us back into our regular rhythms, and I tried to settle into my routine. But the image of him, his smile, his energy, lingered in my thoughts like a stubborn melody. The way he made me feel, it was unfamiliar. It had been years, maybe even decades, since anyone had stirred something in me that wasn't simply buried beneath the responsibilities of my life. But then, on Friday, I saw him again. I had just finished picking out vegetables at the market when I caught a glimpse of him entering the bakery across the street. His back was to me, but I recognized the way he moved. The world around me seemed to slow down, the noise fading into the background as I watched him. I wasn't sure why, but I couldn't resist. I found myself walking toward the bakery, pretending to browse the fruits in front of a stall while keeping my gaze on him through the window. He lingered there longer than I thought he would, chatting with the owner, who seemed to be a friend, before he left with a bag in hand and a light laugh that echoed softly in the crisp air. I couldn't explain why, but I followed him. I stayed at a distance, careful not to draw attention, as he strolled through the streets. Every few moments, I'd look up, pretending to read a sign or examine a shop window, but all the while my eyes were locked on him. It was as if I couldn't help myself. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Answers? A reason to justify the curiosity growing inside me? Or maybe I was simply caught up in the way he made me feel alive again. Over the next 2 days, I couldn't help but follow him. Not in an obsessive, unhealthy way, just enough to satisfy the curious pull I felt toward him. Each time I saw him, it was as if the world around me disappeared, and I was transported into his orbit. I watched him in the park as he jogged past me, smiling politely as if he didn't know me at all, then again at the cafe, where he returned, sitting at the same corner table with a book I couldn't quite read from where I sat. I didn't approach him. I didn't know what I would say. But I watched him, and it was enough for now. But as I watched him, something shifted inside me. I could feel it. He noticed me too. At first, I dismissed the fleeting glances. Surely they meant nothing, just a chance meeting of eyes. But then there was that moment. A brief exchange when he looked up from his book, and his gaze met mine. His smile was subtle, but it was there, unmistakable. And when I smiled back, his eyes lingered, just a little too long. I couldn't deny it anymore. There was something between us. Something electric and undeniable. IT had been 3 days. 3 days of following him, watching him, wondering if what I felt was even real, or if it was simply a product of my mind playing tricks on me. 3 days of this growing tension that had settled in my chest, like a fire that wouldn't go out. On the fourth day, as I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, my hands trembling slightly as I adjusted the collar of my blouse, I realized something that scared me. I had to know. I had to see if this feeling, this strange, inexplicable connection, was something worth pursuing, or if it would remain a distant fantasy. What was I so afraid of? It was only an invitation, a small step that could change everything or lead to nothing at all. But still, the thought of actually speaking to him in person, letting him see me, truly see me, was terrifying. I hadn't opened myself up to anyone in years. Not like this. Not since, well, not in a long time. I paced my apartment for hours, wondering if I was being foolish, wondering if I was imagining this connection in the first place. But then I thought of him, the way he smiled at the barista, how his eyes seemed to search for something more in the world, as if he wasn't content with simply living the ordinary life that so many people settle for. How I could feel the air around him crackle with possibility. I had seen him at the café earlier in the day, and he looked up just as I was about to leave. That smile again, faint but there. Our gazes met, and this time, there was no turning away. I felt my heart race, my breath catch, as though the universe itself was telling me I should take a chance. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, I wrote a note. Simple. Direct. And yet, somehow, my hands shook as I folded the paper neatly into an envelope. I don't know if you're interested, or if this is just a fleeting moment, but I'd like to invite you over to my place for a coffee if you're free. No pressure. Just two people getting to know each other. I placed the envelope on my hallway table, my heart pounding as I told myself that this was just one of those things you did when life was too quiet, when you needed to break free of the patterns that had held you captive for so long. I couldn't spend my life wondering, what if? The next morning, I mustered the courage to slip the note into his mailbox. My fingers grazed the cool metal of the mailbox as I dropped the envelope inside, and for a moment, I just stood there, heart racing, waiting for something to happen. For him to come out of nowhere and make me realize how ridiculous I was. But nothing happened. I left. I went back to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and tried to go about my day. But deep down, I knew I had just done something that couldn't be undone. It wasn't until 2 days later that I heard from him. I had spent those days in a haze, constantly checking my phone, constantly second-guessing my decision to even send the note. It was absurd, wasn't it? Who was I kidding? A woman my age, inviting a young man into her life. He must have laughed when he saw it. Or worse, ignored it completely. But then the knock came. I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't ready to face him, to see if he'd turn my world upside down, or if I was simply fooling myself. I opened the door, and there he was, standing in front of me. Just as I remembered, except now, he was more real than ever, and his presence filled my entire doorway. Elena? His voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it that made my heart skip. His eyes, those eyes that had followed me so many times, now held an intensity one couldn't look away from. Yes, that's me, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the way my heart was pounding in my chest. I had to remind myself to breathe. He stopped himself, glancing down at the note in his hand. I'm sorry if this is unexpected, but I got your invitation. His smile was hesitant, unsure, but kind. And in that moment, all the anxiety I'd felt melted away. There was something in the way he was looking at me that made me feel seen. You don't have to apologize, I said, stepping aside, silently inviting him in. I was suddenly aware of the way my hands moved, graceful, almost as if I were preparing for something grand. I had no idea how this would unfold, but it felt inevitable, like the quiet gathering of a storm. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning my apartment, settling briefly on the simple but intimate details, the old bookshelves, the delicate lace curtains, the faded rug beneath our feet. He was taking it all in, and I was doing the same. I led him to the living room, my thoughts racing. I wasn't sure where to start. Should I offer him something to drink? Should we make small talk? Or was this moment so much bigger than anything that could be said in words? I wasn't sure if you'd want company, he said, his voice tinged with the same uncertainty I felt. I'm glad you invited me. Thank you for coming. I smiled, though my heart was still racing. I don't know what I was expecting either, but I'm glad you're here. And then, before I knew it, the distance between us closed. He took a small step forward, and I felt it, the weight of his presence, the heat of his proximity. It was electric, the kind of tension that only existed in stories, in dreams. Yet here it was between us. His hand brushed against mine. A simple touch. But it felt like everything had shifted. I couldn't pull away. The world outside the apartment faded into oblivion.
I was consumed by him.
And when his lips touched mine, it was everything I had feared and everything I had longed for all at once. His kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if testing the waters. But it deepened, becoming more urgent, more desperate, as if we had both been waiting for this moment. There was no turning back now. In that moment, time itself seemed to stretch, as if the years of doubt, the years of loneliness, all melted away in the warmth of his embrace. I had no answers, no explanations. But I didn't need them. The world had narrowed down to just us, and that was enough. The hours that followed were a blur. Everything felt like it was happening too fast, and yet at the same time, exactly as it should have. He stayed longer than I thought he would, and with each passing minute, the tension between us shifted from something unfamiliar to something inevitable. We barely spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Our connection was something we understood, without having to explain it. But still, the questions lingered, unspoken, threading their way through the silence. What was this? Why had we both come together in this way, at this moment? Was it simply a passing attraction, or was it something deeper? And more importantly, what would happen when the evening ended? He sat on the edge of the couch, close enough for our knees to brush, yet far enough to remind me that we were still holding on to some sliver of caution. I didn't want to break the silence, yet I was afraid of it, too. I wanted to hear his thoughts, his intentions, but the fear of hearing something that would shatter this fragile moment kept me quiet. Finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a kind of vulnerability I hadn't expected. I don't know what I'm doing here, Elena, he said, his eyes not meeting mine. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that reminded me he was just as unsure as I was. I don't know what this means, or if it's something I'm ready for. I felt a lump form in my throat. The truth of his words stung, but I wasn't angry. No, not angry at all. It was a quiet understanding, a shared recognition of the complexity of what was unfolding between us. We were both stepping into the unknown. I know, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what this is either. But maybe that's the point. He turned to face me then, his eyes searching mine as if trying to decipher the emotions written there. Are you sure? Because this isn't easy. And I'm not sure if we're even allowed to feel this way. His words struck deep, though I knew they were true. There were so many reasons why we shouldn't be here, so many reasons why this was wrong. But in that moment, none of those reasons mattered. I reached out, placing my hand on his. Maybe we don't have to understand it all right now, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of what I was admitting. Maybe it's enough just to feel it. The intensity between us grew, thick and heavy. There was no going back from this now. He leaned in, his lips brushing against mine again, this time with more urgency, more passion. My heart raced, and I felt my pulse quicken as his hands found their way to my face, cupping it with gentle care, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. The kiss deepened, and I let go of everything, every doubt, every hesitation. In that moment, there was no age, no difference between us, no reason why this shouldn't happen. There was just the undeniable pull between us, the way our bodies fit together, the way our souls seemed to connect in a way I hadn't thought possible. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. Words couldn't explain what had happened between us in those few moments, Those moments that felt like a lifetime in themselves. And when we finally pulled away, our breaths mingling, I knew. I knew that what we had was real, that what we were feeling was real, and that no matter what the world thought, it was worth it. The morning after felt surreal. I woke up, alone in my bed, yet I wasn't entirely alone. His presence lingered in the air around me, in the faint scent of his cologne that still clung to the pillows, in the soft hum of my thoughts, where his face kept appearing, his smile, the touch of his hand on mine. I could almost feel his lips on my skin again, a gentle reminder of the night we'd shared. I sat up slowly, the room spinning just a little, as if the weight of what had happened hadn't fully settled yet. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Could it have been nothing more than a fleeting moment, a desperate need for connection that simply found its way into the wrong place?
But no.
It was real. I got up, feeling the cool floor beneath my feet, and went to the window. The world outside looked unchanged, untouched by the intensity of what had just happened. Life was moving on just as it always did. But I wasn't the same anymore. The knock on my door came just as I was trying to collect myself.
My heart skipped in my chest.
I knew who it was before I even opened it. There he was again, standing there, looking just as beautiful as I remembered, his eyes holding something deeper now, something I couldn't quite name, but knew was there. His smile was warm but cautious, as if he, too, was unsure of how to move forward. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, as though testing the waters. "I hope I didn't wake you." I shook my head, forcing a smile. No, I was awake." He stepped inside without waiting for me to invite him further. There was something familiar in the way he moved now, something that suggested he felt comfortable here, in this space that had once felt so solitary to me. "I just wanted to check in," he said, nervously running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want you to think that what happened last night was just a one-time thing, or that I'm not serious about it." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over the uncertainty I'd been feeling ever since he'd left. The fear of having been foolish, of having overestimated something so fleeting. But this wasn't that.
He wasn't that.
I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I'm not sure what this is either, but I know that it meant something. It wasn't just a mistake. I feel it too." He stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me again, that we would fall into the same passionate embrace. But instead, he gently cupped my face in his hands, his thumb brushing along my cheek. "Then let's take it slow," he murmured. "I want to be here with you. I want to see where this goes." I closed my eyes, letting the sincerity of his words wash over me, and nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of what might come. For the first time in years, I felt alive again, ready to follow the path wherever it might lead. As we sat down together, my heart full of anticipation, I realized that it wasn't the world that had changed, but me. I was ready to let go of the fear, the doubt, and embrace something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. Hoped it didn't take long for us to find a rhythm. The days blurred into one another, each one bringing a new sense of comfort, but also a new kind of tension. We were walking a fine line, constantly navigating the unspoken rules that the world had set for us. Age, society, expectations, they were always there, lingering in the background, reminding us that what we shared wasn't something most people would understand. But in his eyes, in the way he touched me, none of that mattered. He never made me feel less than. He made me feel seen, desired, and, for the first time in ages, whole. We spent weekends together, meeting in places where we could steal moments away from the rest of the world, parks where the trees shielded us from prying eyes, quiet corners of cafes where we could speak without fear of judgment. Our conversations started as cautious, polite exchanges, but soon they turned into deeper talks about our lives, our histories, and the things that shaped us into who we were. It felt like we were learning each other in a way that was sacred, as if we were peeling back layers we hadn't shared with anyone else. His past, his dreams for the future, the places he wanted to see, I wanted to know everything. And in turn, he seemed eager to know mine. But despite the closeness, there was always that invisible barrier between us. It wasn't something we spoke of directly, but it was there. And I could see it in the way he sometimes hesitated before touching me, as if afraid of crossing a line, as if afraid that the intensity of our bond would somehow overwhelm us both. And I, too, hesitated. I wondered, in the quiet moments when he wasn't near, if I had done the right thing. Was this truly a love that could stand the test of time, or was it a fleeting escape from the loneliness that had once defined me? Was it just an illusion, something that would fade as quickly as it had come into my life? One evening, as we sat on a bench by the lake, the air crisp with the early autumn chill, he turned to me, his expression serious in a way that made my heart flutter with both hope and fear. "Elena," he began, his voice low, almost hesitant, "I don't know where this is going, but I can't stop thinking about you." His words hung in the air, and my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't expected this rawness, this honesty. I thought we were both content to let things unfold, to let time reveal what we were truly meant to be. But now, the weight of his feelings was out in the open, and I had to face the reality of it. "I can't stop thinking about you either," I said, my voice trembling just slightly. "But I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what this could mean. For both of us." He reached for my hand, his touch warm and grounding, as if reassuring me that everything would be okay. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to see where this goes. I don't want to lose this, us." For the first time, I allowed myself to fully let go of the doubts that had been holding me back. I leaned in, kissing him gently, savoring the sweetness of the moment, the tenderness of his touch. And in that kiss, I felt everything I had been afraid to admit. This was real. This wasn't a fleeting moment or a mistake. This was something worth fighting for, something worth exploring, no matter what the world thought of it. As we pulled away, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "We can't hide forever, Elena. But I'm willing to face whatever comes, as long as you're with me." I nodded, my heart swelling with a mixture of love and fear. We were standing at the edge of something we couldn't fully comprehend, but we had both taken that step forward. There was no turning back now. It's strange how life can surprise you when you least expect it. I never imagined I would be standing here, at this point, feeling the way I do, alive, renewed, and full of hope. When I look back at the woman I once was, the one who had built walls to protect herself from the pain of past losses, I hardly recognize her anymore. Love, real, raw love, has a way of breaking down those walls. It doesn't ask for permission, nor does it care about the time or place. It simply comes, taking you by surprise, and forces you to confront everything you've ever feared. And it was with him that I learned that lesson, through the unlikeliest of connections, through a bond that felt like it had always been there, waiting for me to finally find it. I often think about how things could have turned out differently. How, if I had let my fears dictate my actions, I would have missed out on all of this, the moments of pure joy, the way he looks at me like I am the only woman in the world, the quiet understanding that passes between us when words fall short. There are still moments when I catch myself wondering what the future holds for us. The world around us hasn't changed. The judgments, the whispered comments, the silent stares that follow us when we walk through the city together. People don't understand, and I know that they probably never will. But none of that matters. What matters is that we have chosen each other. Against the odds, against the expectations, against the voices that tell us what is right and what is wrong, we have chosen to be together. And in that, I have found something greater than I could ever have imagined. I have found the courage to love again, to rediscover myself in ways I thought were long gone. The years have taught me so much, but they've also taught me that love doesn't stop when you reach a certain age. It doesn't stop when society tells you it's time. Love is timeless. It doesn't care about the rules. It simply exists in all its messy, beautiful, unpredictable forms. As I sit here, thinking about the journey we've shared, I know that this is only the beginning. There is no destination, no finish line. Just two people, learning and growing together, taking life one step at a time. And no matter where it leads, I will follow him. Because this love, this connection, is worth everything. So, yes, I am older than him. Yes, We have both crossed boundaries that others might find unacceptable. But in the end, who are they to judge? Only we know the truth of what we share. And that truth, I have learned, is enough. For the first time in years, I am free. Free to love, free to be who I am, and free to embrace whatever comes next, without fear, without hesitation. And as I look at him, standing beside me, I know that no matter how long we have, it will be enough. Because in the end, love isn't about time. It's about the moments that make us feel alive. And I have never felt more alive than I do now.